Well, hello there. My name is Annalisa Maria. Welcome to my channel and welcome to a very spooky edition of Cryptid Corner, which is the series where I sit in a corner and talk about cryptids. Today we have a very special cryptid on the agenda, a cryptid who I hope fits the spooky Halloween theme enough for an October Cryptid Corner, and he is the notorious Mothman. So, let's get started. First of all, a brief overview slash background on the cryptid Mothman for those of you who are not familiar. Unlike the last subject of Cryptid Corner, Sasquatch, Mothman has a distinct starting point as to when the legend was born. And since that legend was born, descriptions and various characteristics of him have sort of morphed and spread to different things throughout the years. But overall, a few things have remained the same, and that is that he's a very large, very tall. Reports range from around 7 to 10 feet. He generally has the shape of a man, like a slender humanoid figure. And he is dark in color, brown, gray, black, one of the above, has a large wingspan, and glowing red eyes. So, the said specific origin of this legend is in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in 1966. Now, the most famous first sighting of Mothman is often reported to be from two couples that were on a drive out in the countryside to a rural area outside of Point Pleasant called the TNT area, which was used as a dump for military munitions during World War II or post-World War II, which I had to look up what munitions are, and basically it's just chemicals, machinery, weapons, and other materials that they used during the war, and they just used that to store it. So it was called the TNT area because I think it was purportedly mostly TNT that was still dumped there post-World War II, because again, this is in 1966. So the two couples are out in this area, probably making out, macking in their cars, whatever, and their names are Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Mallet. They saw the creature, it clumsily ran towards them, and in their headlights, its eyes glowed red. Then they sped off, terrified for their lives, and the creature rose into the air like a helicopter and followed them, and it apparently reached easily 100 miles an hour following them before they finally got away from it and got to safety. Unlike modern-day depictions of Mothman, which often include his eyes glowing on their own volition, the original reporting actually only said technically that they glowed when the headlights caught them. So I don't know if that really means that the eyes glowed themselves or if it just appeared that way when the headlights caught the light. Unclear. This is basically reported as the most famous, very first sighting of Mothman because these kids reported it to the newspapers like as soon as they got home, and the guy that actually was interviewed said he wouldn't have reported it if he was alone, thinking that he could have imagined it, but all four of them saw it and all four of them experienced it, so they decided to report it. And allegedly the next day, all Point Pleasant went out looking for it to try and kill it and find it, and they found nothing. But the more interesting details of this time period are not that. Basically, after everyone heard about this, the initial newspaper story was published, you know, like a creature, bird, something, or whatever it was, is what they called it. And when people local to the area heard about this, they started reporting other sightings. Just 50 miles away, as the bird flies, as the crow flies, or in this case, as the Mothman flies, there was another Mothman sighting just 3 days earlier? Yeah, 3 days earlier. This other reporting, which was reported by Kenneth Duncan allegedly happened on November 12th, 1966, 3 days prior to the couple sighting. And it is, I plugged it in on the map, the two areas where this happened. The first sighting was in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, obviously, in this area that's some nature preserve or wildlife center or something like that now, which is actually really interesting to note because it also, before it was turned into a World War II munitions storage facility, it actually, prior to that, was a wildlife sanctuary. Specifically, the area was a bird sanctuary. Note that as well. Kenneth Duncan and 4 other guys were helping him. He was digging a grave for his deceased father-in-law, rest in peace. They overhead, across the sky, saw flying a gigantic brown, they described it as a brown thing. It was flying overhead and it looked like a man with wings, and they certainly were nearby in terms of both literal distance, proximity, and timeline. Let's skip to the good part, actually the tragic part, but the most interesting part of this whole 1960-1967 area of original Mothman sightings, which is what most people who think of Mothman maybe think of, which is the collapse of the Silver Bridge in 1967. Side note, 1967, such a hot year for cryptids. We got the Patterson-Gimlin film, we got the collapse of the Silver Bridge, Mothman sightings nearby. In 1967, the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant, West Virginia collapsed. I don't know anything about bridge architecture or architecture in general, but basically one of the pieces in the bridge that was connecting other pieces, a bunch of other pieces, wasn't strong enough to support the weight of modern cars because it was built so many years prior, and one day there were just too many people sitting on the bridge and it weighed too much and that one thing collapsed. And the bridge was also not built in a way to where there was backup mechanisms in place to safeguard for possible failures like they are now. So because that one piece collapsed, the entire bridge came down. 46 people died in the collapse of the Silver Bridge. This is sort of a well-known historic event in general, more specifically just in that area, I think, because something that not a lot of people pay enough attention to is that it actually was a really tragic event. Sure, it's not a lot in terms of sheer numbers, I guess, when you think about like tragic events, but also that's technically a really horrible way to think about things, so forget I said that. Anyways, what I was trying to say, those were real people that died on the bridge, and they all had families and stuff probably, and people who knew them, and they didn't do anything. Like, they were just sitting on that bridge, and then all of a sudden they were like drowning and getting smashed by vehicles. So the part that Mothman and cryptid enthusiasts are more interested in generally is the fact that after the bridge collapsed, in fact, probably immediately after the bridge collapsed, I don't have proof that it was immediately after the bridge collapsed, but within days of hearing about the collapse of the bridge, people were reporting that they had seen Mothman on or flying over the bridge in the days prior or hours leading up to the collapse. Now, is there any photo evidence of this was my first thought when I heard this, because these Point Pleasant people, they've been seeing Mothman, they're all about Mothman. Do you not, I guess photos weren't the same in 67. I don't know enough about photography to really know how likely it was that someone would be carrying a camera. I just feel like someone would have had a camera and taken a picture if so many people saw him on the bridge, because allegedly many people did. I found this photo from the West Virginia Historical Society, and I don't know what year it is exactly. There wasn't any information on the date on the website of what year this photo specifically was taken. It just says with the description, the Point Pleasant Silver Bridge before the collapse in 1967. So does that mean it was that year, that day? The 5 years before? I don't know. I don't really know. I suppose I could call them and try and find out, but I wanted to release this video today, so we're not doing that kind of research right now. I think it's pretty interesting. A lot of people will probably see this and say that's like a weird bird or a piece of trash in the sky or something, but to me, it seems a little odd that this is allegedly an undoctored official photograph from around the very close time period of these sightings and a place that is very well known for this creature. It seems a little odd that this giant fucking black shadow that looks like he has a little man head and a giant wingspan is just just hovering over the Silver Bridge that collapsed. So those are the most fascinating, probably, or definitely the most well-known sightings in 1966 and 1967, but also in that time frame, another sighting reported when these newspapers were kind of all about Mothman sightings and publishing them and all that. So Newell Partridge in Salem, West Virginia, I believe a day before the couples incident, the famous couples incident on November 15th, had this weird thing happen with his TV. And then he went outside and he saw like this bird-like creature with red eyes staring at him, and then his dog was like going crazy and it went out after it and it never came back. I don't know how I feel about that one. What do you guys think? Well, a local science guy of the time suggested, when all these sightings were about, that it was actually possibly just a sandhill crane, which are allegedly up to 7 feet tall and can reach 100 miles an hour and are white and have red markings around their eyes that could look like they're glowing in the dark. I think this is a fair theory. Like, upon hearing it, you're like, that could make a lot of sense. But I think it's a little odd how many people were seeing them. I think a lot can be said for mass hysteria and subconscious and conscious mimicking of reports and behavior. But you know me, I'm a believer. I think there's something more going on here. Another very popular theory is that Mothman is of paranormal origin, whether magical / demonic or of alien origin. Many believe that he has something to do with doom and being a harbinger of it, or a harbinger, or a harbinger. I don't know how to say that word. How do you say harbinger of doom? Anyways, with Mothman being seen before the Silver Bridge, with this guy's dog disappearing, and even afterwards allegedly being reported to be seen before 9/11, earthquakes, tsunamis, and other natural disasters, a lot of people theorize that Mothman has something to do with fortune telling, and he's either a bringer of or a warning for something bad happening. I love me a cryptid. I just love me a cryptid, and I don't want to dislike them. Some of them are sort of unarguably evil, but I like to think ones are good when I can, and in this case, I think Mothman is warning us and he's trying to help us out, but he also doesn't really want to get like found out and seen, so he's not doing the best job. With modern days getting moderner and moderner, it's easier and easier to doctor photos and make things up, and it's always been easy to mistake things for other things and think that they are things that they are not. But people are still seeing and taking photos allegedly of Mothman. In 2016, there was famously a photograph of Mothman in the area. I think it was literally in Point Pleasant, where a guy who allegedly had just moved to the area and knew nothing about Mothman had just seen that and thought, wow, that's fucking crazy. I'm gonna take a picture. And then he posted it places and everyone's like, that's Mothman. I don't know how much I believe that, but the picture looks pretty cool. Unfortunately, people online said, hey, that's an owl with a snake. He's just an owl holding a snake. But you know, as much as people like to say humans have too good of pattern recognition where we just make things into things that they're not, I also think you technically can't really say it looks more like an owl holding a snake than it does Mothman. Like, to me, it looks more like Mothman than it does an owl holding a snake. Technically, I could see the owl holding a snake, but I could also see Mothman. As far as what he is, some people also speculate that there may be some sort of mutation or like toxic illness going on, disease, mutation, some sort. I think it's popular especially because of, you know, other popular media and superheroes and villains, and especially at the time, but also because he, in his most famous sighting, was literally at the site where military-grade explosives and other possibly dangerous chemicals were confirmed to be stored there and almost definitely leaking into the environment. So the idea that there could be some sort of creepy, mutated, creepy sandhill crane, or that it could be a natural mutation of some other kind, whether involved with the chemicals or not, and no, maybe it was originally a person, maybe it was a bird and person. And speaking of, where did we get the moth? Like, why does that not come up? Like, there's very little to do with the fact that he looks like a moth now. Some people think that it's because there was a superhero villain guy named like Moth Lord or like something like that. Anyway, could he be some sort of biologically natural, whether mutated or not, creature similar to that of Sasquatch or the Loch Ness Monster, of which I think are most likely of biological origin? I think it's unlikely. I think the Mothman is something more. I think he's connected to like the spirit realms or I don't know what, but he's definitely not from this world. He kind of like came into our world at a point and did some spooky stuff, you know what I'm saying? I feel like we don't have a lot of, I don't know. And some people would argue that Sasquatch is of paranormal origin as well, but I disagree with that. I think it's fun to think that Mothman might be, though. So what do you think of Mothman? Have you seen him? Have you heard of him? Do you believe he's real? What do you think, he is a cranky bird, case of mass hysteria, or paranormal harbinger of doom? Harbinger. Anyway, no matter what, he's a very spooky, classic, creepy, amazing cryptid man, and I'm very happy that you joined me to discuss him here in my Cryptid Corner today. Please come back for more videos. I'm trying to post twice a week in October, and we just consistently, in general, I like to post things cryptid, spooky, witchcraft, paranormal, lots of different stuff. If you have a cryptid you want me to talk about, I would love to hear who that is, and I'd love to hear of a cryptid I maybe haven't heard of and get to do a little bit more research. But thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again.